Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. The rollout of the agenda is ever speeding up, and we are ever unmasking its path. The families with the biggest stakes in these plots and schemes have been at it for centuries, but they can only continue to do so if they remain unknown. So come and look at the lives and histories of the Bundys and the Collins tonight on Rogueways' third in a series of the Illuminati Bloodlines. Rogueways is a part of the Eyes Open network, and we invite you to join us in the Eyes Open Facebook group on the rogueways.org website or on the Rogueways YouTube channel. We hope to see you around. And finally, as some of you may know, I have launched my Patreon. I love you all so much, and I do this shit just for the fuck of it. But if you want to support what I'm doing, I would love to give you something back for it. Go check out the offers I have for you, and feel free to kick a little something my way if you love Rogueways or any of my other work. I appreciate you so much, and I thank you in advance, truly. But back to the evils of the world. Let's meet our crusaders of the evening. Coming in hot, we have Claude Furry. Claude is back to slay the demons of the world as a shaper of copper, a drawer of tarot, a carver of runes, a researcher of all things esoteric and mysterious, a lover of the people, and a dear friend. Claude, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
And returning once more, we have Brett Sailors. Brett joins us again, this time as the one and only Eyes Open Network investigative live reporter, bringing us the story from such locations as the Texas Tesla Tower. Brett, thanks for being here.
Nice to be here.
We have our pointless question of the evening, as always, and it is, what do you guys think about the death of the war criminal and likely assassin, George Bush, a.k.a. Magog?
What can you say about George H.W. Bush that hasn't been talked to death? I think I may have shared a link to it, but one of the most interesting stories about that man is how his plane, and this always just drives me nuts, and thinking about what he must have taken to his grave with him, it staggers my mind. But I love the story about where he's flying in World War II and his plane goes down by a Japanese island. 9 members of his crew get captured by the Japanese and get eaten alive or whatever, cannibalized by the guys on the island. And somehow George H.W. Bush escapes on a submarine that came out of nowhere.
What?
Yeah, dude, it's creepy.
What was the submarine actually? Like, who was the submarine?
It was I don't know. I assume it was a United States submarine, but it just so their plane goes down, it crashes. They get on the island. He decides to stay behind. They get eaten, and he gets to go away on a submarine.
Some fucking pact with the devil.
No, it's not. So Magog is more than an interesting nickname. But yeah, crazy stuff. But as far as him dying, it's not a loss to the world. But I guess maybe depending on who you ask, but it's... I don't know. I feel like I would have liked to waterboard him and get some information out of him before.
I would have liked that too. No, fuck, I can't really say that.
What do you think, Brett?
Good riddance, I suppose, would be the first thing that comes to mind. Not a big George H.W. fan. He's been a plague on humanity for a long time, and it's about time he's dead. I heard something today, though, and forgive me if I fuck this up. Either he was born on the same day as Aleister Crowley, or he died on the same day as Aleister Crowley. Either way, I thought that was interesting based on the fact that Aleister Crowley could very well be Barbara Bush's real dad. So I thought that was kind of a neat thread.
That is interesting. Yeah, and I'm just going to throw one out there for Bad Tracy on this. I'm glad you're dead.
Wait, for Brad Tracy? Oh.
Yeah.
The connections to the JFK. Yes. Got it. I also dislike this man immensely. The most interesting thing that I learned about him recently was I was watching, I think, Jay Meyer's documentary, and it was about a castle, which I'm not going to remember the name of, but it's somewhere over in, I think, Belgium. And there's a room in it where they think that possibly they sacrifice little kids and stuff. And on the roof of that room is 1,000 points of light. And George H.W. Bush, Sr., the one who just died, twice in his, I want to think his inaugural speech, I don't know, some big speech, one that many people would watch, mentioned 1,000 points of light. So like a lot of people think that ties him directly to this very dark satanic place and act.
I wouldn't doubt it. That was a very weird thing for him to say during that speech. Jay Ritchie actually made a joke about that today, I guess, which was fantastic. But I guess in Kuwait, to commemorate George Bush's death, they have like this big, what are they, these huge towers with his face plastered on them, like he's the savior of Kuwait or some nonsense, like as if we all don't know the real story.
Yeah. And the poor people there that have to like look up and see that, they're like, this is the guy that fucking destroyed our whole country, and here he is. Like, who gives a shit if he's dead? We celebrate his death.
Yeah, Jay goes, hey, look, it's 1,000 points of light.
Oh shit, it was too. It was in like little lights on the screen. Crazy. Yo.
It's just creepy stuff. That whole family. Hey, we could probably actually do an entire one of these episodes on the Bush family and how they tie into the rest of them.
Seriously, with Barbara, Alistair, George H.W., and W, and then how they tie into all these fucking horrible events around the world. Like, they may as well be an Illuminati family. Actually, I mean, maybe they are. Who knows?
Yeah, actually they tie in. Yeah, it's that intermarriage and name changing, like we talk about. You know, they're all one and the same.
It was like we got Bush, or we got Bush, Clinton, Bush, or something. It was just like back and forth between Clintons and Bushes in our presidency for a while. And then we almost got Clinton again.
Well, but we ended up with what is Trump, her like ninth cousin, second removed or some stuff? It's the same blood. So
wow. We can't get away from these fucking people.
No. There's no getting away from it. They're selected. So
yeah.
So, and I think that's what we're out to prove, right?
Right. So let's get into it. So we're going to start with the Bundy family. So do either of you guys know where the Bundys come from or what their start sort of was, as far as we can tell?
I know that I think the Bundys, I know that they were Puritans. I couldn't find a whole lot about where they came from.
They were Puritans?
I know that they were Boston, kind of like Boston elite in the 19th century. What they call them, the Boston Brahmins. They were kind of like the high society. They ran the churches, ran the banks, stuff like that. Very powerful in Boston prior to the war. I assume that they are a First Nation, or not First Nation, one of the first types of families to come over way back when. But like I said, it's just super hard to dig up information on some of these families. And I think that, go back to your point there during the intro, we have information based on what Fritz Springmeier put out to even know to research these families. But when you start looking at the names, some of them you can't find information on where they came from unless you're looking at like the Astors, and we know, they've got a hotel named after them. But the Bundys in particular are a little harder to tie down.
I saw something that maybe they came from Switzerland and before that Venice, but yeah, it's hard to like nail down a lot of this. And most of what we know, like you said, does come from Fritz Springmeier's 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati. But didn't you come across some things that were questionable about that book?
I did. So when you start just Google 13 Families of the Illuminati, you're going to get link after link after link that go back to either reprints or repostings or direct links to the CIA.gov website where this document is sitting. And to me, that makes it a little questionable. I wasn't able to find, or haven't been able to find since we started doing this, anything that mentions 13 families outside of what Fritz Springmeier gave us. Now, maybe I'm wrong about this. I'm just not looking in the right place, but I can't find it.
Well, and it seems like that even the number 13 would be chosen by someone who's more on the Abrahamic sort of side of things, because 13 is looked at as this unlucky sort of satanic number. So like, I don't know how arbitrary that number was. If you just like find a bunch of family names, you're like, oh, I got to 13, we're done now. But maybe there's a lot more than that, or maybe there's actually less if they're all kind of intermarried and
there's about 1,000
inbred
to do with that. You got, what is it, the Council of 33? We hear about the Round Table 33, whatever it is, all the time, and then the Council of 300 and all these things and
all these groups.
Yeah, and then there's, even in the Fritz Springmeier document, it talks about there's a power pyramid, and you can kind of look at that and see that even the 13 families, they're pretty low on the pyramid, according to him. So it gets kind of like, well,
because we, like normal people, we're not even on the pyramid, right?
No, we're under it.
Yeah, we're the sheep. Yeah, for sure, we're the sheep. And I think that's the point when you look at Illuminist manifesto. We're not even considered the same class of person, really. We're not Illuminized according to their tradition and their beliefs. And I don't even know, after learning a little bit more about Illuminati, I don't even know if it's fair to even call the 13 families quote unquote Illuminati.
Yeah, because the Illuminati, that word in itself is sort of a who knows who put it out there. Like, I almost wonder if it's more of a CIA word, like conspiracy theorist or whatever, meant to sort of confuse and possibly discredit people. Because Freeman Fly likes to point out that the only group that has claimed that they're Illuminati is the OTO, the Ordo Templo Orientis. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And so if there's an Illuminati, it's just them. And then anybody who's a part of that it doesn't matter what your family is, you have to like join it and be a part of it. So
that's interesting too. If you look at the original Illuminati, you call it the original, I guess. We know it's a lot older, but the Bavarian Illuminati with Adam Weishaupt, their deal is you recruit one person of noble birth or from a rich family at a young age when they're impressionable, and then they only ever know who two other people are in the group, but they know they're a part of a much bigger group, and it spreads like that. It's where the Marvel gets the idea for Hydra from, and it's spread throughout pop culture, that idea of having this super secretive group where no one knows who the leader is, no one even can tell who other members are. We have terrorist states that use that same methodology to carry out what they do. If one of them gets arrested, they don't know who else to finger.
Yeah.
So it literally is a Hydra. So I mean,
and
Go
so
Ahead and 15 others exist. So
it's alignment with like Freemasonry and whatnot is just total happenstance.
No, actually, what was it in 1778, I believe, the Bavarian Illuminati actually took over the vast majority of Freemasonic lodges in Europe, and they became illuminated lodges, and that's how we have, the Jefferson, not Andrew Jackson, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, the founding fathers. That's how they became illuminated, because those lodges existed in the United States at the time. People came over from Europe, illuminated the lodges in the United States, or, colonial states, whatever. And then that's how it ended up spreading here. So it existed, and it's almost like they created themselves an outward face. And maybe that's where, we might be able to tie in 13 families into it from, because we know that Adam Weishaupt was probably controlled by someone else, because he was an interesting cat to research in and of himself.
Yeah.
He was very connected, but he had somebody pulling his strings and saying, okay, you're creating a sort of external face for our organization to start to conquer things again. And I don't know, it's interesting, especially when you look at the creation of the United States in 1776 and the creation of the Bavarian Illuminati in 1776 at the same time. It's just, then watch the thread's going to go out. But none of this has to do with Bundy Collins. So I don't know.
No, but I'm sorry, Brett. We went off on a tangent, but
no, keep going. I like that.
I'm fascinated by it, because I wonder if Freemasonry, before it was co-opted by this illuminated whatever Minerva people, was actually something kind of like chill or good. Who knows? Right?
Well, you got to go through ebbs and flows, because you look at the start with the Templars and the Rosicrucian order and all this, and the church suppressed it, and then they started to have a resurgence, and then they were in another turmoil, and then Adam Weishaupt comes along and takes them all over. I think that they've been used as a tool more than anything else throughout the centuries.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe always with the same end.
It is handy to have a group of committed followers who are basically going to do what you ask them to do, because they want to get higher up and get more secrets and get more status and whatever.
Oh, for sure. And it becomes even better, because you have this group of people in every major city in the world who are all pretty well to do. They're all nobility or elite class, especially the ones who get in higher grades. And just as an example of what that can do to have control of those types of organizations, the French Revolution, the entire thing was started by Illuminati lodges.
And probably the American.
Oh yeah, the American, absolutely, for sure too. And it was, they almost lay like a groundwork of that. Okay, this is our practice run, and then we have Albert Pike talking about later on. He talks about his blueprint for world wars, and you kind of take that back in time and you look at, okay, well, they kind of had a test run with the French Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, World War One, then World War II happens, and it's just almost perfect. And then what comes next? Well, according to the questionable documents from Albert Pike, something fucking horrible is going to happen. So, but to draw it back to the two families we're talking about tonight, I feel like if you, from my take on it, I feel like the Bundies have been sort of strongmen. They're always in positions of power. They've been in the CFR, Skull and Bones, oil magnates, you name it. They've been a part of just about everything.
CIA even.
CIA, are directors of the CIA, that's right. So they've been in charge of things, and they've been ordering people around. That's why I want to call that family really sort of muscle. They're pushing their agenda. Was it what's his name, McGregor or McGeorge Bundy? He was an advisor to two presidents.
His first name was McGeorge.
McGeorge, yeah, interesting name.
Okay. That's how you want to roll.
So you got these guys, they're either in charge of something or they're whispering in the ears of the people that are in charge, kind of keeping them in line. And then, so McGeorge Bundy was JFK's advisor, and we know that Kennedy is an elite bloodline as well, so it gets very incestuous. And if you look at the Collins traditionally, according to Fritz, are the more spiritually aligned, almost druidic, occulty family. And they put themselves into positions of power in the same way, but they're, according to him, they're sort of more the spiritual backers, the spiritual. So, and there's some creepy stories involved with that too. So
yeah, some nasty ritualistic killing type of things. Yeah.
Involved with what?
With the Collins.
The Collins side.
Oh, okay. All right, so that's basically the Bundy's place is like the muscle, and they've been involved in those types of things. Do we know any of their major sort of power plays or events that they pulled off?
Yeah. Again, I don't know this for a fact. It sucks when you can't vet your source. Like usually you can check a couple of different things. And the only things I could vet Fritz's work against were people that claimed to be past Illuminati members and now they're whistleblowers, but
yep.
A lot of that stuff doesn't really ring true to me. So,
yeah, most conjecture.
Yeah, they typically just seem like people that might have they're a little bit off mentally, or they just want attention or something. But if this is to be believed, Eric Bundy pulled a pretty sweet power play on Howard Hughes, and might have in fact, not sweet, I mean it's horrible, but he might have in fact not only murdered him, but swindled him out of all of his wealth, and then had two doubles that portrayed Howard Hughes for 4 years before they announced his death. So by the time they'd announced his death, they'd already besmirched the guy, made him look like he's some sort of weird hermit pissing in jars and stuff. And, by the time they'd isolated him from society so much that 4 years later, by the time they announced he's dead, no one really knew him anyways. And so there's a good chance no one knew him because he wasn't around anymore. He wasn't no longer on the earth. And I mean, his wealth, I believe, was probably estimated back in the day at like $3.5 billion. So I don't know what that would be by today's standards, but it would just be a ridiculous amount.
Trillionaire. Yeah, that's all the money they ever need.
Who's Howard Hughes? Sorry.
Lindsay Sherman, get out of here.
I don't know anything.
So Howard Hughes was, oh my gosh, where do you even start with Howard Hughes? We could have a whole episode on just him, right?
This happens like once every episode where I don't know anything and everybody thinks I'm retarded.
Probably the best. I hate to say this, but probably one of the best ways to familiarize yourself with the Howard Hughes story is to watch the movie The Aviator. It's not entirely factual, but it's a good picture of how crazy he apparently went toward the end of his life. He was. So when did he start?
I think this wasn't the Spruce Goose. Wasn't that the first thing? They did?
The Spruce
that airplane.
Yeah. So he was an aviator, he completely infatuated with flying. I don't remember how he made all of his money to begin with, though. It's been so long since I looked into the guy. But interesting story, involved in all kinds of stuff. Hughes Telecom, Hughes, the Hughes Satellites. His company still exists now. So even though he's been gone since, when did he die? The 60s? 50s?
I think 71, I believe.
71, yeah. So
well, no, they said 75, but this
right,
said
yeah.
71, yeah.
So yeah, so he died, and then they didn't tell anybody while they were siphoning his money away.
Wow.
So he had one of the biggest corporations on earth, right? So he had government contracts. His fingers were in everything. You know, he was on all kinds of councils and stuff like that. And then he just went nuts and started peeing in jars.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, though, they
peeing in jars.
Yeah, I mean, the guy was a titan of a businessman, but like what you think about is Howard Hughes, rich guy. Some people will think Aviator because Leonardo DiCaprio was in it, and like Spruce Goose, that was pretty famous. But you're just as much you'll think about him being a weirdo and being a recluse, and living by himself and just pissing in jars because he didn't want to go outside. And the fact that he got such a bad reputation as being a recluse, I'm thinking, think of who owns the media. It'd be pretty easy to just besmirch somebody, and especially if he's dead. Well, hey, I haven't seen him. Well, yeah, no one sees him. He's a recluse.
Yeah.
It's a pretty
maybe he didn't even exist.
Pretty tidy way.
So what did he do to piss them off? Did you already cover that and I missed it?
No.
I don't know that there's
I'm not sure
specific thing you can point at.
I think they wanted to rob him. It's basically what
Or
it was.
I wonder if he just like wouldn't go along with whatever their stupid plan was because he's not evil.
Well, he had his secrets and everything, so he knew a lot of secrets, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this was the guy that did the government contracts in World War II, making I think, what was it, McDonnell Douglas? He was part of that group. There was a few that he was a part of, having those big government contracts, making the airplanes, things like that. And he was also into Hollywood big time, too. He did, what was that famous movie he did? Hell's Angels, with the word from. So he was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, what's funny about that Hell's Angels? I was looking into Hughes a little bit, and they were saying what a success that movie was, and it grossed $8 million. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like shit, but back in the day, $8 million was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So yeah, big blockbuster.
The 30s, I think.
Probably like 30s, 40s. Yeah, so $8 million back then was a blockbuster.
Interesting.
So yeah, so the Bundys kind of controlled that man's life at the end of his life.
Interesting.
We can talk about, before we get on to serial killers, we can talk about George Bundy a little bit more. So he was interesting. He was, I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe he was Skull and Bones in the Harvard chapter. He was known as one of President Kennedy's wise men. Served as a tenured. Now this is interesting. So he served as a tenured professor of government at Harvard University, despite only having a bachelor's degree and never having taken classes in government.
Man, fuck that guy. I should fucking have a job like that.
So you want to talk about a power play? Who did he know to be able to get in that type of position at Harvard University?
And this is Mick George.
Yeah, McGeorge. Yeah, so this is the same guy. He died in '96. He was the same guy that, like I say, he was advisor to President Kennedy. Skull and Bones. He ended up being dean of faculty in arts and sciences at Harvard at the age of 34, while only having a bachelor's degree.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So,
well, something else with him. Excuse me. In his earlier years, they said he went into the service, and he goes in as a private. Within a year, they make him a captain, and he's actually he's placed in charge of doing logistics for the invasions of Sicily and Normandy invasion.
Shut the front door, man! I did not see that. That's
yeah. So a guy with 1 year military experience is designing these like grand plans of war. That guy had a blessed life.
Yeah. Or I mean, God, maybe he's a freaking genius and he just like flies to the top of everything, but I doubt it.
Yeah, highly.
Well, you typically don't even get a chance to, no matter what your level of.
No. Even World War II, you go into the freaking army as a private. You don't just become a captain. It doesn't happen.
Right. Not in a year.
No. You have to. You don't get a battlefield promotion from private to officer. That's not the way the military works. How in the world? So this is totally bizarre to me. And you're right, it smells freaking dirty. I don't care if there's a quote unquote valid story to that. It just doesn't happen because in order to become an officer in the Army, you have to go to West Point. So unless you've got well, you can either do West Point or you could do ROTC, but that doesn't happen. So
yeah, well, and what they say that after that, he, with no credentials, in 1945, he becomes the assistant to the Secretary of War. So
it's almost too ridiculous to make up.
Wow.
It's crazy. So this man was connected from birth, obviously, because how do you don't just it doesn't just happen.
Right.
It doesn't just happen. And we can take that back into who they're related to if you want.
Well, wait, I think there's some more famous Bundies that we want to talk about.
Yeah, let's talk.
And even with McGeorge still, I mean, just to kind of tie this up.
Flesh it out.
I mean, so look what he did. I mean, he has this wild military career, which is pretty implausible. Then he's working for the Secretary of War. And then, let's see here, he becomes a consultant to the Economic Cooperation Administration. And, yeah, then he goes to Harvard, and within 4 years, he's the dean. It's like, come on, man. Like, so he's like he has contacts in the military and in education. I mean, that dude's got his tentacles in, like, everything that runs society.
True.
We didn't even mention the big one, did we? I think, wasn't he involved in the CFR?
Yes. Yep.
John Brisson is like screaming at us right now. I'm sorry. John
Brisson. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, he, if I'm not mistaken, he was one of the founders of the CFR.
Wow.
Yeah.
That same McGeorge guy. Wow.
Yeah. So somebody in the chat might correct me, but I know I read.
CFR is the Center for Foreign Relations, right?
Yes.
Council on Foreign Relations.
Oh,
Council.
you're right, Clark.
Which is they
a non-governmental.
Call them.
It's like a non-governmental think tank, right? And it's all the most like well-connected people are fucking plotting and scheming for the New World Order.
Oh, absolutely. You could almost have a series on just what the CFR has had their fingers in over the last 40 years. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But just knowing, so McGeorge Bundy, after World War II, during which Bundy served as an intelligence officer in 1949, he was selected for the Council on Foreign Relations. So there you go.
Then he went on to become the president of the Ford Foundation as well.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like he was just really spoiled, and he's like, I don't want to be military anymore. And they're like, okay, McGeorge, we'll let you do the school thing. And then he's like, I don't want to be the dean anymore.
He just bounces around. But see, that's why I really think they were kind of enforcers. They had their fingers and everything, making sure they have a person there that's pushing all of these different disparate operations in the right direction. Right?
Yeah.
Something that's funny about the Ford thing is I'm reading, and it says that he was a skull and bonesman, and the way that he was pressing his agenda on the Ford Foundation so hard that both of the actual Fords, people that carried that last name, resigned in disgust. So within a short amount of time, he had taken over the Ford Foundation. Like, actually kicked the Fords out of it, and he's running it. Like, that's pretty wild.
So muscle is a good way to describe them then. They're like, we need somebody to go over here and get this done. Now you're going to go over here and get it done. Interesting.
He died pretty young too, 1919 to 1996. So my grandfather was it 19?
20 to 90, 77 is not bad. I'd make that run. I'd be.
I guess 77. That's a pretty good run.
I'll be okay with that.
77 is there something there? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm like still doing like master cleanses when I'm like 90 or whatever, then maybe I'll be fine with going to like 130. We'll see. Do yoga every day.
That guy. Just think about everything that guy did in his life. That is a huge fucking resume. Holy cow.
Yeah.
If you don't have a resume, no one has that resume. I don't care.
In that many different directions. That's pretty weird.
Totally.
It kind of shows you too, like Illuminati Bloodlines, the kind of muscle that they have, because the Fords were no punks. I mean, that was a big, impressive dynasty of a family, and for this guy to be able to push these dudes out of the way, that says a lot.
That's a good point.
Oh, crazy.
So, should we get into the other famous Bundy?
There's a couple more. I think before we hit Ted Bundy, we can look at
everyone knows Ted Bundy but me.
Right. So I was listening to another show on the Bundies a little bit. They have very good information, but one thing that this lady was able to chime back is she found that the Cliven Bundy of 2014 fame of his standoff against the government is actually related to the same family.
Wow, really?
Yeah, which is
So
interesting.
that makes that even more likely to have been not necessarily like a false flag, but more of a cultural maneuvering, like cultural mindset shaping event.
I kind of took it in the direction of this is a standoff against the government. They knew that Ruby Ridge didn't really work in anybody's favor years before, right? We all know what Ruby Ridge was. Fast forward and you look up Ruby Ridge. It's creepy. Okay. So fast forward and you got this whole standoff with the Bundys. And then a couple of years later, you have the Dakota pipeline thing happening. And it's almost like it's less of infighting between them, and it's planned to desensitize the public to these type of standoffs, right? You know, you have these are normal people standing up to the government, and the reason I say that is they want that to happen. That's one of the classic modus operandi of the Bavarian Illuminati. Rather, they create dissension. It is thesis and antithesis to create synthesis. It's having this person fight this person over an ideological belief, preferably against their government, which is either right-wing, left-wing, socialist, communist, whatever it is, against the people who feel oppressed, and because they don't believe in government. They truly want it all gone so they can control everything. What's the easiest way to do that is to desensitize people to that type of violence and standing up to their government, because ultimately they don't want the United States government to be a thing. That was part of what the Civil War was about. They have to get there, though. It's not just, it's a game of chess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they have to probably have some form of consent or make it seem like there's consent in some way.
Right.
I saw something interesting that Cliven, he was doing an interview, and he's standing there with his Stetson cap on and stuff, and his son is beside him, and on his shirt is a Baphomet.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, dude. Yeah. It's like someone had that. I watched the video and someone had that circle. They're like, dude, that's a fucking Baphomet in this guy's shirt. Like, do you think that's on accident?
That's not on accident. Yeah. Good catch. That I do. I think they're all occult practicing sort of people, or they have occult knowledge, and that's part of what it is to be at these levels. And that's, I think, why they understand that they need consent at some level, or else they're breaking universal laws. Once you know that, especially, and then you break it, like, that's even worse. So
one of their things, though, is to make sure that they're putting forward the face of being quote unquote Christian, good people, that type of thing. The Cliven Bundy, his whole family, the Bundy Ranch or Bundy Town, whatever they call it, they're famously Mormon in that area, and good, just, upright, standing people. And then he comes out wearing a Baphomet shirt, so that makes it even crazier.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I heard a theory, too, that they were trying to get militias stirred up, because a lot of people would see that and say, hey, this is bullshit, and they wanted to see how many people would rush to the aid and, like, were willing to take up arms against their own government. And that was kind of, they're trying to poke the bear as much as they can.
Beat them out of the bushes and see who runs, and then get them.
Yep.
Well, I remember 2014 looking at that entire situation before I really started digging in. I had known a lot of stuff, but I don't know. You can't use the word woke, but you
were woke light.
I was woke. I wasn't looking between the lines. I was super on Team Bundy. I remember. I was like, yeah, fuck the government, man. They can't do that. He can feed his cattle there, whatever. Why are they chasing him after with guns? This is weird. So I was on Team Bundy. I was like, fuck them. And now I'm like, wait a minute. It
was all witchcraft, because realistically, that guy probably has more money than God. He doesn't need to use, like, he could own that land if he wanted to pay for it. He just chooses not to.
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing. That land is historic land. That was homesteaded. He never paid a dime for it aside from taxes until that whole thing. So, So basically, his family came in, moved to the area, homesteaded the land, and it just became theirs.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, there was no deed of sale.
Right.
part of the thing that makes it seem really orchestrated too is when you compare like every other time, whenever people stand up to the government or corporations in a way that wasn't planned and orchestrated, they get the shit fucking beat out of them, like at Standing Rock and like at the WTO protests and other such events, Occupy eventually. Like there's always some violence involved if it's something they didn't want, and when it seems like when it is something they want, there's less. Like that, there was really no violence. Like there was no rubber bullets, there was no tear gas. You know, I guess eventually some guy got shot or whatever. I don't know. I don't pay attention to details.
Well, when's the last time that there was a real uprising like that against the government? I want to say, what, Waco, the Koresh?
That didn't go very well.
But I'm trying to think of the last time there was a standoff where there were actual shots fired. I really think it was.
Was that Ruby Ridge? Oh, you know, there was that one where the government dropped fucking bombs on the entire. It was like the move. God, somebody knows what I'm talking about. The government dropped incendiary devices from helicopters on an entire city block to take out a group of, in Chicago or whatever. It was like a group of African American activists.
Yeah,
I want to say it was like the Move bombings or something.
I don't remember that at all. Was that a long time ago?
Move is a Black liberation group founded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Philadelphia, yeah.
Oh, Philadelphia, not Chicago. My bad. I'm real good with geography too. So they had a revolutionary ideology, but yeah, they fucking just bombed the shit out of them. Like, and people, like, nobody talks about it, and that was it.
I don't even think that made headlines.
What?
I said I don't even think that made headlines.
No, yeah, I didn't even fucking know about it until I was like, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. I was like, you would think people would talk about this. Nope.
And yet ranchers in the middle of nowhere are standing off against government for a week. That's it's national news. Come on, man. Yeah. So it's staged, right? And I think that's where we can possibly bring the Collins into it here in a little bit.
Are we going to do the other Bundy first before we?
Oh yeah, for sure. I just I tend to get ahead of myself. Who wants to bring up the other Bundy?
Okay. Are we talking about Al Bundy?
Talk about the kid.
We could talk about Al Bundy all night, probably.
Are we talking? Wait, who's Al Bundy? Is that not just a character in that
he was
TV
on
show?
Married with Children. Yeah, that's
Married with Children.
So Ted Bundy, serial killer. This he's an interesting cat. Most people know him for cutting people's skin off.
Wow, really? Gross.
Yeah, he was a serial killer. I don't have a list of all the people he killed. I know he killed a lot of people. What did they? I don't know.
He was a rapist too. I mean, he raped them all too. Yeah.
So it was all women, or was he gay?
I think it was women. I think exclusively, but I could be wrong about that.
I saw a thing just the other day where somebody had found a pair of human skin gloves that he had made. Oh, so that's how twisted this guy was.
Jesus.
So, yeah, but the thing about him, let's go before all that happened. He talked about actually being a part of being MK Ultra'd, ritual abuse, all this stuff. So he went through a lot of, he went through all that classic stuff. But the thing was, his name was Ted Bundy, but he was adopted.
Oh,
right.
So they adopted him, fucked him up,
yep,
sent him out to kill a bunch of ladies.
Right. So let's take it back in time in his life. He was actually let's see, where is it? He was completely enamored with Nelson Rockefeller. He was, during Rockefeller's 1968 campaign for president, he was the campaign manager for Nelson Rockefeller. Later becomes a serial killer.
Wow.
And if I'm not mistaken, too, he lived in Washington State, I believe.
Yeah.
And Rockefeller's campaign was all the way in Miami. So, like, that's a cross-country drive just to be on that campaign. That seems like more than a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it's that is straight up Manchurian Candidate stuff.
So, can I read a quote that he has that I just found? He says, "I don't have a split personality. I don't have blackouts. I remember everything I've done, like Lake Sammamish, which is in Washington. We went out to Farrell's for ice cream after eating hamburgers. It wasn't like I had forgotten or couldn't remember, but it was just over, gone. The Force wasn't pushing me anymore. I don't understand it. The Force would just consume me."
So the theory is that George Lucas's idea for the Force came from him.
What? No, because that was 1981, wasn't?
Right, but they were talking about it.
Oh, right.
But yeah, I read that on a couple of sites. Now Was it he was actually talking about the Force? When was that? I have to look it up. But the way he talks about it, this first time that it had really been talked about that way, and that's totally creepy. I don't know, it weirds me out to think that our pop culture might be sort of based on that kind of gnarly shit.
Yeah. Well, and this also says, this is just some random site, so who knows what this person is right or whatever, but it says the Force is the very term that high-level Satanists use to describe the power that they believe in, which they believe can be used for either good or evil. Is that true? I've never heard that before.
I don't know. I think it's been too pop culturalized
To get to the bottom of it.
You know, everybody knows what the term the Force means nowadays. Good luck meeting someone who doesn't.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the point. We know that revelation of intent is a big part of ritual magic. So maybe.
Well, anything else about Ted Disgusting Freak Bundy?
Oh, he did a lot of stuff. A lot of his interviews are interesting if you've never heard him. He kind of rambles like Charlie Manson, but you know. What do you got, Brett?
Well, this is kind of an obscure reference, but a band I used to like, well, I still do, but I was familiar with them when I was in high school, called Jane's Addiction.
Mm.
They have a song called Ted Just Admit It, and during the intro, they're playing parts of his confession, and yeah, that dude says some really far out shit. Like, you know, talking about there's going to be bodies turning up, and, you know, he's trying to act as if he didn't do it, but then, you know, later on he goes to confess. But, you know, initially he was saying that, you know, there was other forces at work and it wasn't just him. And yeah, that's included in that song. So if you want to check it out, it's kind of neat.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well,
hey, one more thing. This is interesting. I was on Daily Motion, which is like the UK YouTube, I guess. And I was watching a video about the Bundies. And there was a person on there that claims to be of that bloodline. And her name was Lexi Bundy. So shout out to Lexi Bundy.
Hey, Lexi Bundy.
But anyways, she was saying, hey, Ted Bundy's not part of this bloodline. She's like, you know, I'll eat the shit off of Mick George and, you know, this other folks, but Ted's not one of us. And, you know, I'm sick of people saying that he is. I was like, hey, whatever. Like, that could just be a handle, or that might be a legit person. I didn't really have time to run her down or not. But, you know, she had some weird shit to say. She talked about Vanderbilts, and she said, I don't know. I mean, she might have just been a knucklehead, but if that's legit, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, you'd think they'd want to claim it. Like, I know he's adopted, but I mean, he did the dark work.
Right.
What better way to tie something to your family to get the energy from it without having it in your actual blood, though, than to adopt somebody? Oh, then we can tie that in all sorts of directions, right?
Well, and you know something, too. I mean, it'd be interesting to see the dates that those murders occurred and then asked her out, match it up with like the sun, moon, and the stars and how all that works. You know, if those dates if those were like certain dates that would have more energy for spellcraft and whatnot. Good
point. Especially if he actually is being controlled by some sort of evil force that would know all of those details. He wouldn't even needed to think about it.
Right.
In my opinion.
Well, yeah, it becomes kind of a part of yourself, and that's the part of, you know, the whole the theory is about the ritual abuse. You know, they take you when you're they give you unconditional love up until you're 18 months old, and then at 18 months they begin the ritual abuse in order to break your psyche into. They basically induce multiple personalities in you, so that just like the movie Sybil, you know, one of your personalities will go do a thing and the other one doesn't remember. So if they did that to Ted and then it didn't work, they're going to disavow him completely. All right. Oh, this guy's a nut job.
Well, I think there's that method, like we talked about in previous episodes of mind control, that you can, you know, shatter people and instill personalities, and there can be parts of themselves they don't remember, like you're saying. But I also think that there's the ability to sort of almost implant entities or entity connections that are really, really hard to get rid of. But especially if you're so fucked up internally that you don't want to get rid of them, then you're definitely not going to get rid of them. And that could be what he's talking about when he's saying the force comes over him, and that he just does it, but does remember it. Because I don't think you would necessarily black out. You would just be, you know, influenced and maybe even have access to information that you wouldn't normally have access to. Like there are people who work with schizophrenics and sometimes think that there are entities that are the ones that they're actually hearing, and that they often give them information that they couldn't otherwise have access to. Freeman Fly has an episode with a guy whose name I'm not going to remember right now. They go into that. It's something to think about, but that could be something that is connected with these, especially with the way he describes it. It sounds like it could be something like that.
Yeah, they kind of give us a perfect picture of that in Disney too, which Disney could almost be connected to this. We know that they're a connected family, but you know, the whole Winter Soldier thing, he remembers everything that he was doing, but he was compelled to do it anyway. All right. He wasn't himself, but he remembers it later. So more revelation, I guess, is the point of that. But,
yeah, Ted Bundy could definitely be a Manchurian candidate. That would not surprise me at all.
So let's get into what are the, do we have any marriages or interconnections with other families or bloodlines that come along with the Bundys?
Yeah. The Hollister was the name I picked up. Let's see what else.
Hollister of the clothing line or whatever, the stores.
Perhaps.
Dude, I can't walk into one of those places because it smells like teen angst.
Nice.
Oh, Sasha pointed out it's Jerry Marzinski is the episode of Freeman that they talk about that entity possession of mentally ill people, especially schizophrenics. Oh. Not that I'm saying that's the only thing that ever happens. It's just a very interesting possibility.
So if we can jump on another Bundy real quick before we move on. Harvey Hollister Bundy Sr., he was the Assistant Secretary of State back in 1931. And then he goes on to work for Covington and Burling, which that'll come up again with some of these other folks. But he ends up running the Carnegie Endowment for Peace and yada, yada, yada. Long story short, let's see here. Where was I going with that? Okay, so he runs a bunch of Carnegie Foundations with the Rockefellers. So he's the tie-in between the Bundys and the Rockefellers. And the Carnegie Foundation is, I guess, what brings them together. That's their joint venture. And then William Bundy also worked at Covington and Burling, and he's the one that we were talking about in the pre-show about Joe McCarthy. He's the tie-in there. Oh. That Joe McCarthy had caught wind of some of the New World Order fuckery going on and wanted to have, what is it? I think it was, let's see here. Yeah, he wanted William P. Bundy to testify, and at that point, that wasn't going to happen. So William Bundy was slipped out of the country, and shortly thereafter, Joe McCarthy was no more.
Joe McCarthy of the famous anti-communist hearings.
Right, which they've always painted it like that there was nothing to that, and he was just some warmongering asshole that called everyone a commie. But realistically, he saw this New World Order, one world government being pushed, and he was a patriot, maybe. I mean, potentially. Yeah. I always thought the guy was an asshole, but at second glance, perhaps he saw this thing coming, because as soon as he called out the right guy, or at least one of the right guys, and they were more powerful than the U.S. government because, that guy was subpoenaed, and instead he still got the hell out of town, and Joe McCarthy ends up dead.
Wow.
And all we know about Joe McCarthy is, oh yeah, he was, called everyone a commie, and, he was full of shit.
Yeah.
So, again, someone gets besmirched that may or may not, he might have been right all along.
Totally. And then we think if we look at our history books, they're just fucking full of lies. So it does make me want to question that.
Well, and think
story that's pushed about him.
Don't you, I don't know what, when I heard Joe McCarthy, one of the things I remember is he was always calling out Hollywood. All these Hollywood actors are commies.
Yeah.
They fucking probably were, because how many of these Hollywood actors
totally were
fucking, a bunch of adrenochrome vampire freaks. It would kind of make sense.
Hollywood was just as dark back then as it is now. Like one of the first things I saw about how twisted Hollywood was this video of, I can't remember, but it's a black and white video. That's how long ago it was. And it seems to show like people turning, like actually maybe being possessed momentarily, and just a very creepy, dark film that you wouldn't have expected, especially at the time. So it was a long time ago. It's been going on for a long while. So yeah, maybe he was after the right people. Maybe he was onto something. Maybe he's not this evil witch hunt guy.
Well, I think you've got lots of examples of people actually trying to call out the truth of the quote unquote Illuminati plan and action. McCarthy may have been one of those, and they're going to silence voices of dissent as fast as they can. Jim Marrs has a whole piece in his book on the Illuminati that goes into the creation of communism as a part of, and he does this in an equal way that he does with right-wing politics. So communism, starting with, Hegelianism, the Hegelian dialectic, and the moving on into Leninism, Marxism, and the Communist Manifesto, and how it took root in America, and the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and how it was all kind of connected together in order to make Russia more like the United States and make the United States more like Russia, to create that even little dialectic there, that synthesis, in order to create a situation where no one gets along with anyone. It's an interesting thing, and to have somebody sitting there calling out, this is happening, why don't you look over here, this guy, arrest this guy, it becomes a witch hunt. But they're famous for witch hunts. We'll get into that on the Collins a little bit, because I can tie them directly into the Salem witch trials. They're famous for that, and they're famous, like Lee Chapman said on the previous episode on the Astors. Do as I say, not as I do. I don't know if you remember him saying that. It was, they'll preach from the pulpit to do this, meanwhile they're in the background doing another thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just interesting, because it is a spider web, and it's you can chase any one of these rabbit holes with any one of these families in innumerable directions, but ultimately you're going to come back to the same conclusion, that all of it basically is under the control of whoever's controlling these families, because their names are in everything. They're in communism, they're in right-wing politics, they're in libertarianism, they're in all of the different faiths and all the religions. And they've got their muscle men, which is what the Bundys are, as far as I'm concerned. How else do you have a 20-year-old kid becoming a captain in the army in World War II? It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So, they're muscle men. They have an agenda, and they have to work it out, and they have to do it. And you could speculate on the whys. There's people that say they do it because they want it. They're doing it for monetary reasons, because they're, complete materialists and they just want to run the world, or they're doing it for Lucifer. Who knows what the actual truth is, because we're led in so many different directions when we start researching this. So
maybe not Lucifer, maybe Satan. I don't know. There's a big difference, but I'm not sure. It seems like they're more connected with Satanism than Lucifer, but I'm not all-knowing, so maybe I'm wrong.
Right. There's one more thing that this was an interesting thread, but I ended up on WikiTree, which is kind of like an open source genealogist collaboration site, and they have their AI that builds their family trees is pretty cool. Using this, I was able to draw back McGeorge Bundy all the way to Queen Victoria of Hanover, and I'm not going to go through all 17 steps of Mac Bundy to Queen Victoria of Hanover, but it ends up he's related to the Astors, the Roosevelts, and the Putnams. And the Putnams was interesting because they ran, the Hillary Clinton Campaign Foundation.
Chris Putnam, your family.
I know. Got eyes on him.
We know now.
I thought that was interesting. So I don't know if that's an actual tie-in or not, because when you start taking families back that many generations, it gets hard. But we know that they're big on blood. That's why we're doing the show. They trace their own family trees back like that, and
they're all interrelated and intermarried and incestuous and fucked up.
And that's the point, though, is if you have your family, and they know this as well as anybody else does, if you intermarry cousins too often, you end up with people that aren't right. So,
like the Queen's.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe they want people that aren't right to be the Manchurian candidates. Maybe that works better. I don't know.
I think it's something where they genuinely believe they just need that blood, kept in touch. There's something in the blood, I think, that they think gives them access to something far back. I don't know.
I just thought it was interesting how Mac Bundy was directly related to John Jacob Astor.
And to Queen Victoria, and to, you said, the Rockefellers?
Theodore Roosevelt.
Or the Roosevelts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what a web.
I don't believe in coincidence.
No.
You know, an interesting point I'd like to bring up. This is regarding, so with the whole Joe McCarthy thing. So when Bundy wanted to split, he shouldn't have been allowed to, but the CIA director, who's a guy named Alan Dulles at the time, he pulled some strings and got him on the Queen Mary and got him the fuck out of Dodge, right? So later McCarthy writes to Alan Dulles, who was the CIA director, and says, "I note your refusal to give us any answers to our questions. Your insistence is very revealing." So sounds like he was onto something. But I'll also say, look at today, and like Jim Comey, you know, like they had Hillary Clinton dead to rights, you know, like she was, I mean, totally fucking busted on those on her email server and stuff. And then he'll get up there and just lie at the podium. Oh, well, you know, she didn't mean to do it, so no big deal. So basically, the CIA has been doing nothing but fucking up justice since the inception of it. I mean, because this was in 1953, this guy did this shit. So, I mean, I would say that from the time it got started, it's always been a tool for the people at the top that works against justice for citizens.
And that's why
Wasn't there a Bundy?
What?
Wasn't a Bundy the chief of the CIA at one point?
At one point, yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
Well, Doles for his obedience got that whole airport named after him. Good job.
Yes, exactly.
The CIA, though, is also JFK was after it, because wasn't he the one that said break it into a billion pieces and scatter it into the winds?
Yep.
I wish. That'd be nice. Maybe we can break.
He seemed to be onto something, didn't he?
And then he's dead. What a coincidence.
Mm.
All right, should we move on to the call-ins?
Yes.
All right, where did the call-ins come from? Do we know?
I'll let you take the reins on this one, buddy. What do you got?
Let me see. I'm getting rid of my Bundy notes here and getting onto my comments.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. That's why
Sorry.
It's hard for moving back and forth.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, dude, I'm kind of all mixed up here. Unfortunately, the way I did this, I went by like name of Collins, so I don't have a good chronological timeline here.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Yeah, as far as like where they came from, it looks like there were some. Well, U.S. obviously they were like the New England area, and then also it looks like they have a branch that came from Germany as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's so like John Churton Collins. It looks like he came from Germany.
Oh, he wrote the book on Voltaire too.
Yes. Look at you, Claude. Man, you got it.
Which book? Sorry.
He wrote a book on Voltaire. Don't remember what it was called, but yeah, he was connected. Most of the stuff, a whole lot of the stuff that I found on the Collins people, they're involved with the mysticism side of things.
And is that Harper Collins? You think like that?
Ooh, yeah, probably.
Interesting. I didn't.
The publisher.
Yeah, because a lot of these people are known for like writing like occult books and like books about art and theory and shit. But I wonder if Harper Collins is still from the Collins descendant of the Collins. It probably is, because a lot of these people were publishers.
So they're the like occult side, like Claude was just saying, and therefore the culture shapers.
Yeah, that my understanding, and again, it was pretty limited trying to get research on these guys, was that their occult knowledge was what kind of gave them standing within the 13 families. That they came with more esoteric knowledge than some of the others, and they had more rituals, and they were actually in the forefront for that type of thing.
Is that no matter where we go with this, it always ties back to the occult and magic and Satanism, and it's always like that's their real foundation, whether we like it or not, or believe in it or not.
Yeah,
that's what they believe in.
And ritual sacrifice as well.
Yeah.
Right. So I heard. I don't know if you guys listened to. What you call it? Oh, wow. Dumb brain. Come on, man.
So brain. You even have your knife out. Everything should be sharp.
I know it should be. Not working. Anyway, I listened to a podcast recently about the Collins. Actually, a few weeks before we even started doing this, really, and a lot of their family lines go back to Ireland. Obviously, the Collins. It's according to what he was saying. I didn't actually dig into the research on that, but what he was saying was that what do you call it? The caduceus
Oh, the caduceus.
Caduceus is
The double snake thing.
Yeah, the double snake. That's healthcare. Actually, harkens back to the original Collins family crest.
Wow.
So it's like, well, that's
so they would be like some central fucking people in this game.
Right. So part of it had to do with their druid ancestry, bringing the druidry forward into whatever this big conglomerate of occultism is. So it kind of makes sense, I guess, if you look at it from the point of view of that's all anybody from this particular family is ever seems to be famous for is doing occult work or writing occult work or coming out and whistleblowing occult stuff. So I just found that as an interesting aside.
It's also interesting when we're talking about all this occult stuff, and a lot of occult people think that your bloodline is going to give you your occult powers. Like if you're a witch and you come from a line of witches, you're going to be a more powerful witch, and it's going to be easier for you to do magic if your family has done magic. So maybe they literally think like the magic is in the blood, and that's part of why their bloodline's pure.
I think classically, isn't that the case though? Your power is carried forward, and it's in fact we even had a poll about that in the group, like how important is bloodline to you. That's interesting. I think we may have brought that up before on the show, but we know that it's important to them, so it should probably be important to us. I don't know.
I'm screwed then because my dad was adopted and we don't know that side of my history, our bloodline.
Oh yeah, me too. My mom was adopted, so I don't have. Although the only thing that she knew was that her family was from Germany. I don't know beyond that. Who knows? So
yeah, interesting
stuff. But
I won't say what I am just in case it makes the Illuminati come after me for my blood.
Exactly. They don't want mine. It's too filled with grape spirits. So.
All right, so that's maybe where they come from. How did the Collins maneuver through power? Or what were some of their power plays or things that they've done openly? Or do we really know much? Or it seems like they're kind of in the background doing their occult shit.
They are. A lot of what I was able to find, and I think Brett was able to find a lot of this too, was having to do with an individual whistleblower, quote unquote whistleblower, that came forward named John Todd Collins.
Yep.
You can go listen to, I think he's got 4 recordings on YouTube. You can go listen to. What was he was in prison, I think, in the 70s. I think he was in prison he said he was wrongly imprisoned for rape or something.
Right.
And he came out and he made these 4 recordings somehow in prison and laid out this crazy story about ritual abuse and occult ceremonies. You may remember a little bit more about the particular ceremonies. I think it would be interesting to talk about that. What do you think?
Well, and he got stabbed in prison too, didn't he?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't hear that.
Well, and again, I don't want to mix things up, but like I was saying earlier, like the whistleblowers, they seemed a little bit off to me. But one of them that was claiming to be, but I don't remember if he was claiming to be of a Bundy or a Collins bloodline, but said that he was stabbed twice in prison. I'm thinking, well, if that's, I guess it's possible. I mean, that kind of shit happens, but
they usually protect their own pretty well.
But I'll tell you what, that's an interesting theory, though, Brett. Let's say you were ritually abused, you were broken down into this, whatever it is they break you down into, and then later on you start trying to come out of it. Aren't you going to be just a little bit off?
Yeah. No, I mean, for sure. I mean, good God, stuff that they lived through. Yeah, you would be. But, it sounds so crazy, I guess, just because I do my best to not think about all that horrible shit that people go through.
I know, man.
Yeah, it's like, honestly, even just like I've been going pretty hard on this since Thursday, and that's kind of rattled my cage a little bit.
Yeah, it gets dark and depressing pretty quick.
Yeah, you almost have to try to separate yourself from it when you do the research on it, because it does get like, I can't watch movies like Saw and things like that because of how much it affects me. But I want to dig into this stuff to find out who the fuck is running things.
Yeah. Right.
What's going on, and it gets just as dark as those damn movies do. Maybe that's the point. I don't know.
Well, it's funny. Like, you almost disassociate from it. Like, I'd heard the story of like what was it? I forget what the matriarch of the Collins family, but I'd heard the story of her having a ritual where 7 children are sacrificed, and I thought, kid, and this is like, with the Council of 13 are there present, and she's sitting at her
Oh yeah, the old lady.
Like her chair is shaped like the moon, and it sounds like a throne, like Game of Thrones type of shit. But literally, 13 adults sit there and watch 7 children get fucking slaughtered, and I have to read it like I'm reading a fairy tale, because when I really think that those were real kids that happened to, it makes me want to fucking freak out.
Right.
Right, and those kids apparently, what's it? I think they're 7 years old when they come up to that, right? And before that, they're just coming out of their ritual abuse phase, right? So we know that they've been ritually abused since they're 18 months old. So that's, gosh almighty, I couldn't imagine. And then when they come before the old Collins grandmother, she's picking the ones that she says are valid. The ones that aren't valid get killed.
Yeah. So like the ones that worked on, they're going to keep, and the ones that didn't, they're going to use for other purposes.
Precisely. Well, the other purposes, they kill them, and then she takes some kind of magic quill and writes their name in some book using the dead one's blood.
You can see, I don't know what the fuck those quills are, but yeah, you can see them. They're like little wands, and they're in that artist. There's an artist who lived through ritual abuse, and she paints and draws the shit she went through, and it's really fucking disturbing. It's like kind of black and white a lot with a little bit of color and almost like stick figures, but and then there's all this satanic imagery all over it. But they all, when she depicts them in their rituals, they all have these little fucking wands. And they're also in a picture with Lady Gaga and Abramovich, that Marina Abramovich character, when they were at that crazy fucking party where they have full bodies and like coffins of blood, and they go dip those little wands in the blood and like lick it. It's like fucked up shit. Like I don't even know what the fuck that thing is, but some kind of dark magician fucking wand or some crazy shit. And it's like there's people fucking doing this right now. Like we're talking about it, and I feel like if someone just like listened to that clip, they'd think we're the crazy ones. But it's like we're just describing shit that people are actually doing. Right. You go see pictures of it, like it's happening.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine that is happening, but it totally is. You know, where think about it in this light: we're so separated in the United States and in, quote unquote first world countries from things that are happening in places like Syria. The tragedy over there. Palestine, the tragedy that's happening there.
Yemen is like such a
horrible.
It's just it's a cesspit of death and turmoil in those places. And we're so separated from it that we can talk about it without the real emotion attached to it, because we don't have any point of reference for that type of pain and horror, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, this is another thing that I think that culture shapers, whether you want to call them the Illuminati or what, have done really well by controlling media in Hollywood, is like we have all this violence everywhere. And it's been shown that children, even watching cartoon violence directly after that, they're more likely to be violent or not respond to violence when they see it appropriately in the real world. So that's even cartoon violence. We're like watching fucking gory ass shit like all the time. Anything you watch is going to have some shit in it. And you're conditioned to that. So yeah, we hear things and see things like this, and it's easier for us to disassociate, like Brett was saying, completely from it.
Disassociation is totally part of the key. The more I've delved into the occult research and stuff, the more that I'm convinced that it is a consciousness magic. Because I personally believe is we kind of build our own reality, and then we interact with other people's realities as they're building their own realities as well. And to me, I think that's magic, because we're able to affect other people's realities. That's what magic is. And they understand this to the nth degree. Yeah. So when you look at a family like the Collins, they understood this. What did the Druids do? We know that the Druids were famous for scaring the fuck out of the Romans. I mean, just utterly scaring them. They would come up with their boats, and there would be a line of Druids there covered in blood, just to scare them into submission. And they were crazy difficult for the Romans to defeat, and then they ended up having to go underground, blah, blah, blah. All this history involved with that. Why would a family that has that type of generational knowledge be brought into the fold of a group like the quote unquote Illuminati for their ability to affect reality on the level that they can do it? So what do we have coming from this? We have in the 70s, or was it 60s or 70s, one of the first, big, I don't know if you can call it a sitcom or a soap opera, Dark Shadows. Later on, we have it become a movie with Johnny Depp. I think that they understood that this is the way that things worked. Now, I wasn't able to actually draw the correlation between, modern day Hollywood and the Collins, but I would bet.
Well, Joan Collins.
Oh, Joan Collins, yeah, sure.
And interestingly enough, most people know her from Dynasty.
Right. Fun name, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. But she got her start doing horror movies, and then she started over in the UK, and she also did. Her sister is Jackie Collins, who wrote like trashy novels. I've never read any of them, but my understanding is that Joan Collins, before coming to the US and making it big, she was doing really racy, like topless movie scenes and shit.
Oh, right.
They would remake her sister's novels into movies.
She was in Playboy, I think, wasn't she? One of those.
Yeah, when she was in her 40s, and my recollection was I was not mad at that.
That's funny. But I think that's
interesting too, though, because that's their two things that they're like nailing all the time, which is like one is desensitization to violence and fucking horrible violence, and the other is the creation of this culture that sees sex as not sacred at all, and it's worthless and tawdry and trashy, and like that's our. I was just talking to Hannah from the group today about this. Like that's our. If we have a superpower, that's it. It's that we have this ability to harness our sexual energy, and we're all just like wasting it, and we look at it as a waste, and we treat it like a piece of shit, and we take it for granted.
For sure.
Well, and I think too, like just going back to the Joan Collins thing, I was a kid when Dynasty was out, and I never watched it or anything, but I was familiar with it. Like I think my mom might have watched it, and like I've probably walked through the living room and seen it enough to where I kind of knew that there was a.
I probably know the theme song if I heard it.
Yeah, there was like Joan Collins was a dark-haired one, and then there was a blonde-haired chick, and they're both. I don't know, they were the leads, but what I recall is Joan Collins, just in the limited exposure I had to it as a kid, as I thought, man, what a bitchy person, but I can remember she was a fucking huge star, and she kind of ushered in that whole being arrogant, stuck-up bitchy chick, like, and she was like a huge success and had a ton of fans, and then like think of like down the road, then you had like the same, like Heather Locklear was kind of like played that always cunty chick, and she had tons of fans, people loved it. It taught a generation of people that being sincere and being kind, well, that's not cool. You got to be the bitch, and the bitch is the cool one. They just walk all over these nerds that are, just trying to live their lives.
Oh, it's like a creation of an archetype or something, or the present. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, that's
like
what I was trying to
into the
that.
culture. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Well, so should we get into other name changes, marriages, or connections that the Collins have to other families or people?
Sure.
Yeah, so the Collins, I think they're kind of that they intermarried quite a bit, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean the ones I wrote down, and Claude, tell me which ones you feel most comfortable with. But the Todds, Putnams, Clintons, and Vanderbilts were all the connections I could pick up.
Oh, the Putnams again, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Or Chris.
Chris
connected.
Chris, we found the shill.
We've got so many. Claude, you're one. Remember, you're connected to the birds.
We know our own, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Collins. Gosh, there's a lot. I wish I don't know how to say the name of this website. Bibliotheca Pleiades, I guess. They've got a good list of particular names of Collins here. They've actually got some Bundies as well, and but we got several members of the Masons. There were a couple of 33rd degree Masons, it looks like, but a lot of them, like I said, they wrote books on UFOs and the occult. But I'm having trouble trying to see where they actually intermarried with other, but we know that they do. I did read somewhere that there's a Collins bloodline member at the Bilderberg meeting every year, right, where they do, what is it, some kind of ceremony with some kind of cremation ceremony, and he presides over that every year.
Cremation of care?
Yes, that.
Oh, no way, really?
Yes, that.
Cremation of care at the frickin'. How can I forget the name of this stupid place where they all get naked and run around in the woods?
That's
Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove. I call that Bilderberg, but yeah, it was Bohemian Grove.
Oh, so the Collins oversee that. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. They're kind of like the spiritual masters or whatever. I don't know what you want to call them. The druids, they're high priests. And then somebody, one of the things I was reading said that the members of the Collins family and an interrelated family, I'm trying to find the freaking name of it. Thought I had it written down, but I guess I don't. They were actually involved in the Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
Wow.
They were kind of the impetus behind the Salem witch trials.
Didn't we bring up the Salem witch trials in the last Bloodline Illuminati episode that we did?
We totally did, and I thought this was interesting because one of the points that Lee had made was about these Puritan masters, church masters, and the law practicing these types of things in the background while wanting everyone to be absolutely Puritan and perfect in their congregations. And then, they get 4 or 5 girls to start saying, this such and such is a witch, such and such is a witch, and it just blows up. And it's almost like, in my mind, I want to draw a kind of...
Excuse me.
Now Rogueways has sound effects.
Exercise, you demon. No.
You're being possessed.
There's a dog right behind you. It's totally the dog.
That was the force.
I want to draw this kind of kind of creating a what do you want to call it, subculture type of thing, kind of making witchcraft look punk. You know what I mean? These people are bad. Don't do this. We're going to hang you and burn you and put stones on your chest. They kind of created a subversive subculture in the United States at the time by doing that, right? Now, later on, they're reaping the rewards because everyone seems to be, especially in 2018, we see headlines all the time about millennials ditching Christianity and moving into witchcraft and Wicca and things like that. I guess I'm a good example of that. I'm reading about this stuff all the time. But was that kind of their point? I don't know, equal opposite reactions.
Or did they kill off just like the wise people and the intelligent people, and they're the actual witches?
Right.
Did you check it? I had heard a couple things on the Collins side that when they first came over here, that they had intermarried with like some of the indigenous people that were more on the spiritual side, and like some of the spiritual elders they were able to bring in to the fold to, I guess just to take whatever knowledge they had and bring them in, which I think is interesting. You wouldn't because typically the indigenous people all over the world just get slaughtered and ran off their land and stuff. But I'd read a couple of things that said that the Collins had taken some of the higher ups in the Indian culture and brought them into the fold as well.
Well, that would kind of fit in with a couple different, because when we talk about African slavery, there's always like a tribe or some people in the tribe who are selling off other people or helping the slavers get people basically. And then with the Michael Wan Susquehanna River alchemy episode of the Higher Side Chats, they talked about how there was that ceremony that was at one of the key points in time at a key place on the river that was like the queen was there, and so were the leaders of I can't remember the tribe.
Yeah.
Algonquin tribe or something. I'm totally off. I don't know, maybe, but whatever tribe was involved with that. And so maybe they do like hook up with not just the leaders, but like the spiritual leaders. And then if they were going to intermarry with those, then that would add that type of like magic and that place on the earth into their repertoire, maybe.
Maybe not even intermarrying, but just befriending them to the point that they can soak up the information. Because what do we know, especially Michael Wan talks about, the energetic points, of the globe. What better way to know those in a place that you've never been to before than to seek out tribal elders that know where the energetic places are,
Boom. That's totally it. Sorry, I got excited.
No, it just makes sense. You're going to move into a new area. The first thing you do is seek out spiritual leaders of the area and try to bend them to your will. And why do you do that? Because they have information that you need in order to spiritually conquer the area. And if you can do that by taking over their spiritual places. Now, look, think of Jerusalem. How many times has the temple been rebuilt over the exact same spot?
They're always rebuilt. All of the temples, all the churches. If you go to all the places where the Catholic Church like conquered, they always built their fucking church right on top of the most sacred temple, and they orient it to the same direction, whatever. Like they're using the same magic of that area for sure.
Absolutely, just redirecting it. What's his name? Corey something was on THC recently, and he was talking about the same thing happening in Phoenix, Arizona. It's just so blatantly obvious. And then just this, because it's just the entire city of Phoenix is all Freemasonry. And why? There's all these ancient, what did you call them? I guess there's waterways and stuff and megaliths built all around Phoenix, Arizona that just we simply don't know about, but they're all marked with Freemasonic symbolry.
And they're all like in certain directional orientations, or like all in certain latitudes or whatever. They totally.
So this weekend, I was at a Christmas stall here in Georgetown next to Austin, and we're kind of walking around this little town called Georgetown, and I look up and there's this big, Freemason lodge there in front of me, this ancient building. I'm gonna go check it out a little bit closer, see like when it was built and stuff. But I went, what's special about this particular place in Georgetown? Interesting, because I have to start thinking about that, because we know that they build in places of, energetic power. And I don't know, I'm starting to think that it's probably that way in every major city in the United States. It's going to be that way. There's a reason that these places are built exactly where they were. So,
yeah. Oh, that's it connects with Derek. Derek Murphy just commented too, and he has his whole thing in his area of the world. And there's a famous, like an elitist sort of family there, the Varnums.
Mm-hmm.
And they took this marshland. It was like a hot spot there in that area too. So it's like they send their little scouts out and they connect with whatever natives they can in the area or whatever people of power, and they can like co-opt the energy of that place. Why would you give that shit away though?
A virus, right? Well, I mean, you're forced into it. Think about what
eminent domain.
Aztecs. Oh, eminent domain. That's perfect. Yes, they've even got a word for it. God damn it.
You can give it up the easy way or the hard way, but they're going to take it if they want it.
Yes.
So we just need the Earth to change all of her places of power, and then we need to get to the new ones before they do. That's all.
Oh, that's what you call
No
it.
big deal.
A polar shift is what you call that.
Oh yeah, maybe that's part of it. She's like, get off me.
Yes. No, that's horrible.
That's
so
awful.
good. That's but it totally makes sense, right?
So a weird point that we hadn't talked about yet. There's a fellow named Clifton W. Collins, and they're saying that he was with the Masons and Illuminists, and they're crediting him with starting communists in the early 19th century.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I don't know if you can say communism was started by the Collins family, but
yeah,
this is saying that it is, and perhaps they mean it was started in the U.S. by him.
Oh, that would make more sense.
Going back to the 1800s, I mean, goddamn, they've been trying a long time to make this communism thing land over here.
Crazy.
And you've got that like Ocasio-Cortez, and like she's like socialism. We're starting to hear that more and more, and I think people are not really understanding what it is, or they're trying to make it mean something else. But
yeah,
I think it's just, once again, these guys are trying to push this bullshit agenda on us. That's what it seems to me, anyways.
That's interesting. I'm going to look into Clifton, because I know that, you look at Karl Marx, and he's you get to kind of think of him as the quintessential founder of communism, I guess.
Yeah.
And then,
right.
Literally.
Lenin on top of that. But Jim Marrs was able to tie Karl Marx back to Hegelianism and say that, he was a Hegelian, and then eventually he went through this period of complete atheism and then moved over, and he completely broke and just distraught and had nothing left, and wrote these, his Communist Manifesto for another group and handed it to them. And that's how it kind of, started blooming worldwide. I'd be interested. I bet he never said the word Collins. I'm going to have to find out exactly how that ties in. Was Clifton a...
It says Clifton studied Saint Simon, who was the Mason Illuminist,
Simon, right?
that started communism in the early 19th century. Clifton wrote a book about him entitled Saint Simon.
Interesting. I would bet you $1 million, if I had $1 million, that Karl Marx read that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see that there was a Cop Collins, first name Cop,
Cop.
Cop Collins. Yep.
Yeah.
What's his deal?
His friends called him Dick. But, let's see. He was involved in Republican presidential elections. He had several government positions, and he was also involved in Bahrain Petroleum Company. And this is back in the 1950s.
That puts you into all kinds of money and all kinds of oil, which we know oil runs the world, right?
Yeah.
Did you say Bahrain? Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I used to live there.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's come up twice because it came up in the Freddie Silva presentation yesterday too, as a place of like a really early, really early like pre-Atlantean culture that was also very advanced. Was maybe like running away. I won't give it away. You guys have to go read Freddie Silva's new book when it comes out in March.
All right.
But anyway, that's weird. Bahrain Oil.
Yeah, and then there's it's Bahrain Petroleum Company Limited, and then the other fella, DeWitt Clinton Collins.
So this is the one that I thought might tie into the actual Clintons. Bill Clinton.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I mean, because they recycle those names. I mean, who knows what their names are?
And where else? Yeah, Clinton's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, this guy did his postgraduate work in Vienna, and he practiced law in Chicago. Then so you got Vienna. This guy went to Oxford University. These guys are all over the goddamn place, and making moves. James Foster Collins worked for U.S. intelligence for the United Nations. He graduated from Yale. He worked for the U.S. Senate Atomic Energy Commission, United Nations Secretariat.
So
then he goes on to work for the State Department and, last but not least, the Treasury Department. So James Foster Collins, I mean, how many different ways did he have his slimy tentacles all over things?
Let's see, 1946 to 49. That was Roosevelt. So, and then Yale, probably he was a bonesman.
Yeah, almost certainly he was.
Skull and Bones.
It's so incestuous. That's crazy.
All right. So other important Collins we want to mention?
Michael Collins was a NASA astronaut. Now, I don't know that he was part of the Collins bloodline. I mean, it's possible that he is, or that he isn't. This was a person that, I don't know. I watched a presentation about the Collins bloodline, and this one didn't have a direct, but it could be. And the fact that he was with NASA makes me think that it's possible. Yeah. But he also said some things that did not seem to follow like a Satanist agenda. Like he talked about a belief in God and things like that didn't really seem to go along with the narrative. But he also went along with the fact that he went to the fucking moon, which I don't buy for a second. So there's that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they had some kind of tie-in with NASA. What was that? I don't have it in my notes, but I know they were tied in with NASA somehow or another. But we didn't really talk about Barnabas, the legend of Barnabas Collins at all yet.
The legend of Barnabas Collins.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about Joan Collins, and we mentioned Dark Shadows, and we mentioned John Todd Collins. One of his things was apparently the guy who, I don't think that Barnabas was his real name, but apparently the guy that was portrayed as Barnabas Collins was John Todd Collins' grandfather, or great-grandfather rather, which that's a part of the vampire mythos that we know as vampires today, which I thought was interesting. So you kind of have to draw that conclusion.
So I can't find anything on it right now, but there's also a group called the Collins Elite, which I don't know if they have anything to do with the Collins family, but it was like a group put together by the government that was supposed to look into the connection between UFOs, demons, and alien abduction events.
Well,
so
that makes sense, right?
Actual task force, and it's called the Collins Elite. And if you want to read more about it, there's a book called Final Events by Nick Redfern. Nick Redfern's a pimp.
Oh, yes, he is.
Which is a lot of stuff.
I remember this now. He was on Cult America, or maybe Grand America, talking about this book. And yeah, so he was talking about the Collins Elite. I'm going to have to listen to that again.
Yeah, because I don't know if they're connected at all. I don't know if that's, I think that name was not even their like official. I think that's why it's hard to find information about it. But he's like a really excellent researcher and he'll like dig shit out. But yeah, I wonder, that's an interesting connection there too. I think in the end, they kind of were like, nope, UFOs and demons have nothing to do with each other. The end.
According, that's the official story, right?
Story.
Have you guys seen the pyramid that has Lucifer at the top, and then it has Anunnaki, and then it gets down into like the royal bloodline and all the 13 Illuminati families?
No.
Okay, I just saw that. I saw that one today. It was part of a. Again, I'm going through bloodlines, and you know, some of these were better than others, and this one probably wasn't one of the better ones. But it was an interesting pyramid. I thought, you know, I wonder if there is like an Anunnaki, or if there is something above. You know, because you hear shit about reptilians, and I've always thought that was nonsense. But then again, when you think about some of the horrible things that people do to one another, that seems like beyond human capacity.
It does.
So, I mean, I wouldn't be absolutely shocked to know that there was something non-human that was above some of these families.
Well, it's mentioned several times that the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and probably all 13 families really, and the Merovingians and the Disneys on top of them, all consider themselves as descendants of the quote-unquote Anunnaki. And one of the Rothschilds actually even went to Iraq and started doing digs and whatnot. I can't remember his name anyway. So he had this dig named after him where he's digging up stuff. And part of why Bush went into Iraq the first time, and then George W. Bush going into Iraq later, was to get artifacts out of Iraq that had to do with the Sumerian bloodlines, because they assumed that these artifacts belonged to them because they were part of their bloodline. So we're going to send in our military and take this stuff. There's all kinds of stories as far as, you know, just weird stuff happening, as, you know, the even ISIS, when ISIS went in a few years ago and started destroying temples, and they went in and they ransacked several museums and antiquities departments, just destroying all this old stuff. The United States, for whatever reason, they took extreme action against ISIS right after that. So they really believe this. You know, they're part of whatever this bloodline is, and it's very important to them, apparently. You know, obviously this is all anecdotal and I can't prove any of this, but it's what other people talk about, and I have to share it here. So right. Because
I've heard descendants of Cain as well, and I'm like,
yeah.
And again, I mean, I guess if you take those stories literally, which I don't necessarily, I guess I can some, and others I don't. Like others I think are more allegory, and others I could say, okay, well, perhaps they happened as advertised. I don't know. But yeah, so who knows? I'd like to actually talk to somebody in one of these families that would be honest.
No doubt.
Good luck. They would tell me right before they hang me upside down and slit my throat. So.
Yeah. After torturing you for 3 days.
And Brett becomes the hangman card.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't do it, Brett.
So the Collins and they're pretty evil bastards. And you know, one of the things I wanted to mention again was just how nasty the Druids were. You know, I think we may have actually mentioned it before, but one of their divination ceremonies was cutting a person's gut and watching how the blood flows out in order to tell the future. So that's the type of people.
Just use some fucking tarot cards, bro.
I know, right? But that's how fucked up. And that's, you know, when you mention blood pools, that's the type of stuff you envision, right? That's this human sacrifice and all this, and it moves on. I read a couple of stories while I was researching for this regarding a couple of the founding fathers. I think it was Thomas Jefferson. Anyway, they actually were accused of human sacrifice and ended up getting off of the charge. Apparently the building was burning down and they ran in trying to save people, and they saw people, you know, prostrated up in there bleeding out, and they're like, oh, so they arrested them and took them back. I might have to actually find I can find the articles on that if anyone's interested. But
and that was the Collins family?
Well, no, it was part of one of them was, one of the names mentioned was Thomas Jefferson. And
Jefferson.
Yeah, so I assume, however, that one of the Collins family, or at least their doctrine, has to be involved in that, right? Because that's so nasty,
So
horrific druid
yeah.
stuff, right? And that's, this occult stuff didn't just come from nowhere. So, and we just talked about how, the Collins family seems like they come in and, bring their witchcraft or whatever it is they're doing with them into whatever area that they go into. So I guess I say all that to say that, damn it, this seems like it's a part of our history, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's still going on today.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Well, and something too that struck me funny is Collins and Bundy. It's very, very difficult to find any information on those guys. So, I mean, everyone knows Rockefeller,
Yeah.
I mean, like there's Rothschild. I mean, even normies know Rothschild nowadays. Like, that's been in enough popular culture. But Bundy and Collins, not so much. And to me, I would think if I'm just filthy, stinking rich, I would rather be on the low-key side of things rather than be known as, being a nefarious cocksucker.
Oh, and you know what? That's interesting that you say that, because if you just Google the word Bundy, you get Ted Bundy. That's all you get. Ted Bundy, or
Al Bundy,
or Al Bundy. That's all you get. Google Collins, you're going to get Phil Collins for days.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Oh shit! I didn't even make the connection until just now. I bet he's connected.
Illuminati.
So obviously he wouldn't be as famous as he is if he wasn't connected somehow or another. But yeah, it's that, to me, that's almost like a hide themselves in plain view type thing, or protect themselves by hiding behind a serial killer.
Yeah, I wonder if you can get the etymology of Collins and find anything in there.
According to what's his name, that I can't remember the name of his podcast right now, it's O'Coilan from Ireland.
It says iced gin drink served in a tall glass.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Don Stryker would hit me in the face right now if he knew that I couldn't remember the name of this podcast.
Oh, Guns and Butter or something?
No
Agenda?
No.
Those are the two that I associate with him.
Ground Zero.
Ground Zero.
Boom. There you go.
Collins. Welsh. Son of Colin. Wait, that's Colin's son. Yeah, there's no real etymology that I can find that means anything. Well, because sometimes you can break down the parts of the word and you're like, oh shit, that makes so much sense.
Well, one of the points that Clyde Lewis made on Ground Zero was that you take the name O'Coilan, and he related that to the snakes coiling around the tree as part of their family crest.
Oh, that's why you went with the caduceus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see anything else. All right, so we got anything else to add about the Collins and their evils?
Well, one thing I noticed at both Bundy and Collins, the amount of nonprofits that they're involved in, it's ridiculous. And it just goes to show you the people with the most bread are the ones that are the least willing to want to pay taxes. And while I agree taxation is theft, I mean, these motherfuckers could actually share the wealth a little bit and,
and be
have everyone living in lack. Yeah, exactly.
They could still go on like flying anywhere they want, eating whatever they want, doing whatever they want. Right. Ooh, Derek just brought up that Colin could be connected with culling. Very similar sounding.
That's interesting. Wow, you can take that 1,000 different directions, right?
Yeah.
Because that's part of Agenda 21, the Georgia Guidestones, making sure that humanity stays below a certain level. What is it, 500 million or some nonsense?
That's the desired number.
Yeah. So culling humanity.
Or to choose, select, and pick the best. So they could be like selecting the best, like we were talking about, sacred occult practices or locations, or I don't know. Yeah, interesting connection, Derek. So,
but
all right.
you know how they run all the money, like you were saying. They control all these foundations. They have a huge amount of money coming in, and they're taking donations constantly to all these foundations. But we also know that they also control the banks through the Rothschilds, so they control the money anyway, and yet they're taking donations from everyone else. So it almost seems like a siphon to make sure that people just don't get a leg up.
Right.
Yeah, does that make sense?
You have just enough money to be broke. That's
Yep.
Yes. So that's
Just enough money to never be free from the system.
extra level of control from a spiritual level. Oh, we're already taking 40% of your money in taxes, but there's people starving in Syria, so give us a little bit more of your money. And it's just, it only,
And then buy this piece of shit that's going to break way before it should, then buy another one when it breaks.
yes.
Constantly.
Planned obsolescence. So
Yep.
it's a constant, wow.
It's every single possible angle you're being attacked mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, from like every direction you can be. It's such a really great trap that they have woven.
Yes.
Very effective.
And guys, this is exactly
some people
why
still wake up.
this is
Fuck
exactly why Ben says fuck money. So just,
Yeah. Hey, I'm with it.
It's true. Ben has freed himself from all of this, which is fantastic. I aim to do the same.
Yeah.
So
all right, so we've got the Bundy role overall, as we've decided they're kind of like the muscle, and we've got the Collins's role overall as sort of the occult and culture shapers behind the scenes, like hard to find. Is there anything else we want to add to their kind of overall role in the power pyramid?
I think just knowing that because they intermarry so much, they're diversifying, it seems like. And they've been doing that probably for a few decades, because that type of structure where you have one family that's in charge of one particular thing probably worked really well when the United States was young, and other countries were destroying themselves, and you had the British Empire running the world. But as you get further on and they get further in their plans, it doesn't work as well to have everything so in silos. So you have to kind of diversify, and that's where you kind of look at what Adam Weishaupt did in 1776 with his Illuminati. Was you have one person who's answerable to two people, then you have two people that are answerable to that one person. So basically any one person in the Illuminati would ever know four people.
Oh yeah,
that's it, right? And then you have those people intermarry, and their offspring are brought up in that type of situation. They go through whatever ritual abuse or whatever it is. From birth, they are absolutely ingrained with this belief system, and silence, secrecy, utter secrecy, and they can't talk about it. And then you move forward, and then, like Brett was saying earlier, you have people that come forward as whistleblowers, and they're telling these absolutely unbelievably incredible stories that just seem so fantastical that they can't exist. Odds are probably the majority of that is true, and it's just not something that we're ready to accept. You want to look at a person like that and say, this person belongs in an insane asylum. Well, I'm going to tell you, some of the craziest, most genius stuff I've ever seen comes out of people that were in insane asylums. Have you ever looked at, like, there's entire websites devoted to art that comes from artists in insane asylums? Think about why they were in there. Did they start talking at the wrong time? That type of thing. I don't know. So yeah. It's just that type of horror that a person goes through in order to maintain secrecy and control can probably reveal a lot more truth than what modern day society will give it, because all they want to do is pump drugs into us and tell us to shut up.
Yeah.
So
totally. I think questioning mental health is definitely another mechanism of control. So speaking of those mechanisms of controls employed by the elites, including the Bundys and the Collinses, what is the best way you guys think to disempower some of these, especially given the roles of the Bundys and the Collinses as the muscle and the culture occult side of things?
Well, I mean, looking at the Collins, they were involved in shipping, steel, coal, banking. They got ties to the UN, various forms of government, publishing, and education. So, God damn it, they're hitting us from all directions. I think all you can do is, I mean, gosh, look within. I mean, I reject the propaganda that comes through any sort of media anymore. I mean, that's something that I know well enough to do, and that's something I can do. I also cannot eat shitty GMO-full foods and lay off the fast food as best I can, and shit like that. I don't know. I mean, as far as taking them on head on, the only way to do that is to continually get people to wake up to how fucked up everything is, and that's a losing game sometimes. I mean, I've had a lot of people that probably think less of me now than they used to, or I don't even have contact with anymore because I freaked them out so bad.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that, yeah, until we reach a tipping point to where everyone knows, hey, this is fucked up. Like, we got the numbers, we could do something about it. At that point, who knows what happens, but getting to that point, you do that at your own peril, because you might isolate family and friends, and it's a tricky thing, man. So I would say get your own armor on first, and just lead by example, and then hopefully people will be like, hey, I like your style, I like your positive outlook, what's up with you? And then you throw them a couple nuggets, and maybe they start on the path and wake up as well.
Yeah, I love that. What do you think, Claude?
I'm starting to come to the point to where the more I learn about the Illuminati and their ideals, they want to control both sides of the equation. They want to control the people that are waking up, and they want to control the people that are still asleep, because they want to control both sides of the equation. So how do you get away from that? One of the best quotes that I've heard recently was from George Carlin, where he talks about, I don't care about the outcome anymore. All I'm going to do is watch. And I know that sounds very nihilistic, but he kind of has a point, because when you have a system that controls the entire world, all of the banking systems, and what happens when any country decides to try and get out from underneath that particular control. Look at what's his name from, not Iran, but Yemen, and look at Muammar Gaddafi, rather.
Gaddafi, yeah, he got some freedom. And
possibly Hitler, but Hitler's very, because we know that he's tied into other shit. But there's several examples of it, of Japan. Since they control everything, they control what I put into my mind. And even this episode is a perfect example of it, because when we go look up the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, the main source of information is on the CIA website. So we know that that's information that they're going to give us in order to have this particular conversation. So I have to be completely unattached from the result and be able to kind of just watch it happen. But I can control and I can manifest my destiny based on what's happening with the rest of the world. So I don't have to be completely married to everyone starving around me. And I know that sounds horrible.
It's so true, though.
But what else do we have? What do we have to hang on to aside from our own salvation? So, no, I'm probably going to evolve from this mindset. But
and it ties into what Brett was saying, though. If you're focused on your own salvation, your own inner truth, and manifesting that, then other people are going to notice that and be like, "Hey, what do you have? I kind of want some of what you got."
Right.
So that affects the whole world. It's not really. It sounds selfish to some extent, but it can be very selfless.
It's very true. The journey of one person is only 1 million miles away, but ultimately it's you making the journey.
Right. So. Yes. And speaking of journeys, fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing that we are able to walk this road together. And thank you to Claude. Thank you for being here.
Of course, always.
Good to have you. Thank you to Brett. Brett, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here.
And thank you to all of you listeners at home who are here with us as well. And friends at home, don't let this fear and gloom convince you that you aren't capable of every little thing. It is true what they say, that what we have nothing to fear but fear itself. You are a spark of divinity, and nothing can destroy that except for you. So don't let them convince you that you aren't glorious and indestructible, and don't let them convince you to destroy your own shard of divinity. Their games are so tired and so overplayed and so misdirected and ever full of failure. They still haven't achieved their goals, like we have pointed out. They've been after this forever. Their hubris knows no bounds. But we have access to the highest truth. So keep remembering to travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.